Hey guys, welcome to Indie Game Hustle. In this video for UModeler X, we're going to take a look at how to rig a character. All right, so in this example, I have a mesh that came from an outside source, and it's really just a OBJ file, right? It's just a basic character shape. And what we need to first do is convert this mesh into a UModeler object. So to do that, I'm just going to go ahead and right click. I'm going to click on UModeler X and click on merge here. So UModelize merge. All right. So now that our object is a UModeler object, I want to check to see if my pivot is set. In this case, my pivot is already set, but if yours is not, you can update your pivot by clicking on pivot and setting bottom to center. And that's it there. So the next thing we want to do is go ahead and create a root bone. And to do that, I'm going to right click and I'm going to select the create empty. And when you create an empty game object, it's going to create a child of the default mesh. I'm going to rename this root bone. Now, if you notice above, we have this default mesh and this one. This is the original mesh that what we created or what we had before. And this is the one that was created after we did the UModerizing. So I'm just going to go ahead and move this one out of the way, and I'm just going to hide it so that we only have this mesh in our view. All right, so all we got to do now is head over to the rigging tab, and that's going to be located in our script section over here. It's going to be between the modeling and the painting option. It's going to be that little green icon. Now that we have that selected, below that, you're going to see the rigging mode. And within there, you're going to see animation root and skin mesh root. So what I'll go ahead and do is move this root bone into both of those areas. And then now that that is all set there, I'm going to click on start rigging. All right, so once you do that, what you're going to see here is the bone tree. The bone tree is where all of our bones, once we create those bones, are going to be laid out. Now, if we select this root bone at the bottom, that is our root bone, and it's going to be set to where our pivot was. All right. So of the tools, the first tool of the rigging section we're going to use is the build bones tool. All right. And so below that, you're going to see the tool properties. And what we want to do is select it bone as the top. So what we're going to do is select this here, and that's going to be our root bone, this one, root bone. And then below that, we have a few other things. We can toggle these things off and on. We don't need to mess with any of this. The only thing we really need to be concerned with right now is changing the structure. But because it's a human, we need human. All right. So the first thing we want to do is click on start building. What we need to do is move these little bone points, is what I'm calling them, into position. So what I have here is a little bit hard to see. So what I'm going to do is click it and drag it out here. This is the head, and then this is the neck. So what I'll do is move the neck into the next section. And if it helps, you can go ahead and go into this view so you can do it. And so I'm going to click the head and put the head here, and the neck is here. That seems about right to me, but we want to make sure the head is also centered. So let's go ahead and move that. And so what we're going to do is move the head into the center of the head like so. And then we can also move the neck, maybe center into the neck. Perfect. All right. And so let's take a look at some of the other bones. These bones all look like they're okay, at least as far as this tutorial is concerned. So I think that's pretty much set. All right, so once you have all of those little points in the positions you need them in, all you have to do is click on make bones to turn them into actual bones. And when you click on make bones, if you look in the hierarchy, it actually creates a bunch of game objects that represent our bones here. All right, great. And so as you can see, we have our bones here. If you want to select a bone directly in the editor, what you can do is click and hold down the shift key to do so. So for instance, if I hold down the shift key and I select rotate, you'll be able to rotate that bone as needed, which is great. All right. So now that we have our bones, if we look at our bone tree, you'll see everything is now labeled and it has everything here. All right. So the next thing we want to do is actually assign the bone to the mesh so that when we move the bone, it also moves the mesh. So what I'm going to do is go to auto weight, and below there, you're going to see some more different tool properties. And what we're going to have is the apply weight button and the blend width. And the other ones are just kind of basic. You can just turn these off and on based on what you need to see. But what I'm going to do is leave everything as default for now. So I'm going to click on apply weight and we can see the magic happen. And so now with this root bone selected, you're going to see this heat map, but it's really not a heat map per se, but it really indicates how much influence this bone has on particular sections of this mesh. So if we click on the hips, that's going to change. If we click on the chest, that's going to change. Click on the arm, there, and so on and so forth. So now this is great. So what I'm going to do is actually go into my rotate tool and rotate. And now you can see that we have a connected bone to our mesh. And that's great. Now using the auto weight tool is pretty nice and it's pretty easy, but depending on your mesh and how close certain parts of your mesh are to other parts, you could cause some troubles. The tools that can help us in this would be things like the weight brush. So what we want to do is go ahead and select an area of our mesh, like the legs, and see what's going on here. So to test this, what I'm going to do is rotate this leg out. And if you can see that, you'll see that our mesh isn't, this part of the mesh is not influenced by that bone. And so in order to change that, this is what we need to do. We need to paint the weights. Now, to paint the weights, we're just going to click on the weight brush, and we're going to change the brush type to add. Now, what we're doing is basically, in theory, we're adding this mesh influence to that bone that we have selected. Okay, so if I click here, we should see that this starts to kind of change and deform our mesh. And you can kind of tell red is basically at its highest influence. And if it has no color, like this blue color, for instance, then it means there is, it's not influenced at all. So what we're gonna do is click more into this blue section. And as we click in these little highlighted areas, we started to release that, or to assign it actually. And I'm just going to go ahead and start painting this and assigning all of this mesh to that bone. And you can just rotate around and you can see that this section here is kind of lighter. So we want to kind of get on those points. And the influence is really strong when you're kind of around the point, not so much here, but more right at the points, like so. Just like that. Almost like you're clicking on the vertice points here, like that. So if you notice, there's like a little point here. These two little yellow spots right there are probably going to fix these two little imperfections here inside of there. So I'll just go ahead and click those. You can see how that's affecting that. We could just kind of keep cleaning this up. Kind of working with this, need it, kind of going around here, and the more we clean it up, the better it's starting to look. And then we just kind of go into here, keep cleaning it up until we get the result that we're looking for. All right, so that's looking much cleaner there for that particular thigh area of this character. And so now let's take a look at what's causing this one here. So remember, even though we're moving this particular bone, that doesn't necessarily mean this bone needs to attach this to there. What we actually need to do is see what bone is affecting there. And so if you look, when I select this particular bone, there is a light section here that needs to be affected. Now remember, when you move this bone is also moving. So you want to just kind of be aware that it may not be this that you need to assign that to. You need to kind of see, okay, that area needs to be assigned. So I'm just going to go ahead and click these areas as well and clean that up. All right, and so now our leg is looking much better. And just remember, you can click on a bone by holding down the shift key and clicking. All right, great. Now let's look at the other side, and the other side is going to have the same issue. So I'm going to go ahead and clean this up. All right, so now that we've cleaned up both of the legs, and this is pretty manual the way to do this. So now that we've actually done that, now we need to get our legs or our bones back in the same position that they were before. So your first thought is you could move these bones into position, and I would understand that that's how you would go about it. But actually the best way to do that is actually to use the Reset Poses tool. So what we want to do is click, and it's going to reset any changes that you make if you move the bones or anything like that. So this is looking pretty good so far. Another tool that we can actually take a look at is the Rebind Poses. So for instance, if we have our head here, and right now I would say the head is in a pretty good spot. But if you needed to if you needed to move it, then how would you go about that? Well, one way to do it is to kind of move the bone in the position that you need it in. So say I want the bone to be back a little bit here and maybe a little bit higher. What we do is move the bone into the position we need. And then what we do is Rebind Poses. And so when we do that, the actual mesh goes back into the position, its original position, but the bone stays where it's at. And so we still have that same control, and we can actually, of course, do more painting on this head for this bone as needed. So if we wanted to kind of paint more of this head, we can do so. I'll go on this side and do it, and then I can go on this side as well. And if you're ever out of position, you can always hit the F key and it should focus on the bone that you're working on. You can continue to paint this head all the way around, kind of get that all painted up, get rid of some of these high spots here. There you go. And now we have full control of that head and so on and so forth. Great. So that's pretty good. And of course the neck is here, so we can still move that neck. So that's binded pretty well. And we can just now at this point check to see if anything else is having issues. It looks like we're good to go, but we do have an issue here with the arm. So let's go ahead and fix that. So it looks like it's not this shoulder. It may actually be this left arm. So if you see that left arm, there you have that. So I'm going to go ahead and correct that now, just like so. And if I select lower down, we don't have any issues there. And I'll do the same thing on the other side. Go ahead and move that up. Go ahead and select this bone, and we'll go ahead and fix that. Makes that pretty easy. And so that looks great. I'm going to select the spine. I'm going to rotate this guy back and forth to kind of see if there's any changes there. Doesn't seem like there's any issues there. So that looks great. And remember to go back to the original position, reset pose. We're all set. All right, so great. So another tool we actually want to look at that could be pretty important is the Edit Bones tool. So what we're going to do is go ahead and click on Edit Bones. And once you click on Edit Bones, you'll see a Tools property here below. You're going to have some of your basics here, but the more important ones are going to be the bone name and the ability to add, parent, move, separate, rename, delete, and connect. So this could be useful for adding additional things. It could be a skirt. It can be, you can add a tail on a human or an animal, or an additional tail on a dragon, whatever you may want to do, but this may be the best way to go about it. So what we're going to do is select the bone that I want to attach a new bone from. All right, so I'm going to select the hips. Now you can select it here or you can select it here. That's completely optional. It's up to you how you want to approach it. But I usually select the bone that I want to see here. Now that I have that, I'm going to select Add. All right, so I'm going to click Add. Once you click Add, you want to take it and you want to drag this out, and you'll see that there is a connection to the hips. And now if you had a 3D model that had a tail, you would just kind of make sure that your bone is within it. Now, in this case, the bone is called bone, but what I'm going to do is delete this bone. So if you want to delete a bone, I'm going to click delete. This time I'm going to rename it. I'm going to call it tail _ 01, and then I'm going to click add. I'm sorry. Let me make sure that this is selected. You want to make sure your bone is selected, and then rename it, and then hit add, and then you can go ahead and move that out, and now you'll see that it has that name. And so now you want to name it 2, and then so on and so forth. And so this is going to be good. Just making sure you name things properly so that you have access to it. And if you can see that that is going to show up well. All right, great. All right. And of course, to delete a bone, we can go ahead and click delete. You want to separate it, you can separate it. We don't want to do that, but you can do it if you need to. I'm just going to go ahead and hit delete. I'm going to select this one and hit delete. So that's something to think about, just knowing that you have the ability to edit bones, some other thing. And one more of the tools that you can take a look at is this weight tool. This weight tool, I'm not going to apply it, but basically the weight tool allows you to select a set of vertices that are for the mesh, and you can then select a bone, and then you can assign that weight to those vertices. So whatever you have selected, that weight will be selected. So for instance, if I were to select this leg and I have this bone selected and I hit apply weight, it'll apply this weight to that bone. And just keep in mind, this right now is all red, so all of those will be completely manipulated by that bone. If I were to apply it, I'm not going to do it, but just know that that's how that could work. So these are just more tools at your disposal for painting weights. I particularly just like using the brush tool and painting my weights that way, but if you need to just grab a whole section and say, hey, I need this for sure to be assigned to a particular bone, that's the best way to go about it. All right, so now that we have all of this ready to go, our character is completely rigged, completely weighted. Now what we want to do is turn this character into an FBX so that we can animate. So the first thing I'm going to do is go over to my hierarchy. I'm going to right click on my mesh and I'm going to go down to where it says export to FBX. I'm going to rename this default mesh to _rig. And if you want to drop it directly in the assets folder of your project file, that should be the default. But for me, if you want to change it to something else, you can actually go into your assets, and then I have my stage characters, and then I have UModeler FBX rigged. I'm just going to save it here so you can set that path. All right. I'm going to leave the rest of this as default, and I'm going to click export. All right. And inside of my project files, I have my characters, and then I have my rigged, and there is our default mesh there. And there's our mesh. The first thing I want to do, so here we have our mesh details, and what we want to do is take a look at the rigging section. So click on rig, and we want to change the animation type from generic to humanoid. And what we want to do is click on apply. Now that this has been applied, what we want to do is now click on configure. Now here is where we have our mesh. Now what we're going to do is kind of play with our mesh to see, how well we weighted everything. So here you have different things. You can assign a chest bone here if you want to kind of reassign things. I'm just going to leave these as the default setup. And then at the top, you have your muscle. So this is the mapping of the bones. And then this is the muscle setting. All right. So now this is where we're going to kind of see what we did. Now we didn't put fingers and things in here. If we were going to do fingers, we would have probably just created new bones and renamed, but we didn't need to do that today. All right. So open and close. All you have to do is slide this left and right. And as you can see, doesn't look like we have too much pulling. Things look like they're okay. So that's looking really good. That's looking pretty good. We can go left and right and kind of see if there's anything going on, any funkiness going on. So it's looking good. We can go the roll in and out, just like so. That's looking pretty good. Let's see, what else options do we have? The head, we can do that. So that's looking pretty good. Neck roll, that's looking great. So for the most part, our character is looking great. It looks like everything is rigged as expected. So I think I don't need to go through every single thing here. So I'm going to go ahead and hit done. So our character is there. So the next thing, what we want to do is set them up for animation. So the first thing inside of my folder, what I'm going to do is go right click, create, and I'm going to create an animator controller. I'm just going to call it default controller, control or con, that's fine. And I'm going to double click on this here. Now inside of here, what I'm going to do is right click, create state empty. I'm going to name this idle. I'm going to create another one, and I'm going to name this run or walk. There we go. Next, what I'm going to do is right click on this, make a transition to walk, and then I'm going to make a transition to idle. Now I could make another animation, and maybe I will. Let's do one more animation for fun. We'll just go ahead and do this one, and I'll just make a transition here, and make a transition back to idle. And so we should have 3 animations playing on our character here, all right? And so for idle, what I'm gonna do is select idle. So this is the animation clip. And then I'm going to select walk. And for this one, I think I'll do a pickup, and then I'll just name it the name that it is, pickup. That should work just fine, and there shouldn't be any issues there. Great. So I'm just go back to my scene. What I'm going to do, this is our original mesh. So what I'm going to do is now is take this FBX that we exported, the rigged, and put this into our scene. I'm not going to put it into the scene this way. I'm going to put it into the hierarchy so it'll be in the same position. Then I'm just going to hide this mesh so it's not seen, or I can just move it out of like so. So now this is our actual rigged mesh. I'm going to select this, and where it says animator and controller, I'm going to drag this here. And now we have our animator controller there. And also, we can also remove root motion, so he will walk in place as opposed to moving through the scene. And I can show both options. All right, so that should give us everything we need. Let's see how this looks. So I'm just gonna go ahead and hit play. Now, and this is what it's looking like. So we have our character, and they're kind of walking, they're moving, and it looks pretty good. It looks like we have everything set up, and it's all working as expected. Now, if I were to go to that same rig mesh and I apply root motion, what's going to happen is they're going to walk forward and do that just like so. As you can see, rigging inside of UModeler X isn't too bad. It's actually pretty easy and straightforward. I would love to see what you guys are doing with it, what you're rigging, what you're doing. Having the ability, honestly, to rig directly in Unity is amazing. And the great thing about it, honestly, is it's pretty easy to do. The tools are straightforward. Painting is straightforward in terms of painting, weight painting. It's easy to do. All the controls are there at your fingertips. So let me know in the comments what you guys think. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit that like button. It really helps support the channel. And if you haven't already, consider subscribing and ringing the notification bell so that you never miss out on the future content. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you on the next one.